We're next going to talk about working with dates. How do we handle dates in MySQL? Because most of the data that we're querying, it's usually based on a date range. Somebody's going to ask for data requests for a specific date range. But then sometimes the data that's in the database may not be in the format that the requester is looking for. In order to make date-related calculations, the column type has to be a date-related type. So they can be a date, date time, or timestamp. And the difference between date time and timestamp is that timestamp factors in the time zone. So if you select a particular column and it's a timestamp, it's going to adjust it based on the time zone of the server. Whereas date time, that does not change at all. Once you add the column value, it'll stay that way, regardless of the time zone. There are 60 MySQL date and time functions. Here's the documentation to all of those functions. Lots here. You can click on them individually to get the usage, then the syntax. But we're not going to cover all those. Most databases have their own set of date and time functions. Sometimes they may share the same name between the different databases. So say Oracle, it has 25 date and time related functions. Microsoft SQL Server has 26. But of the 60, we're going to cover 14 of them. So following the 80-20 rule, we'll look at how 20% or so of the functions will handle 80% of the use cases. Actually, I would say even more than that. All right, so go ahead and create a new file called lecture exercises dates.sql. You can create a new tab by clicking the SQL icon, or you can close the old tab, but make sure you save your work in the previous lecture for the case statements. So I'll call this dates. Okay, so the first one we're going to cover is the curDate function. It just simply gives you what is the current date time, or just the current date, I'm sorry. We'll make this simple. Go ahead and run the select curDate. Just make a comment here, just to maintain consistency. So you can see that I'm working on this on the day of the lecture. And so that is 2020, March 26th. So it does not include the time. The now function does include the time, so it'll give you the date and time. This is based on the time zone of the LMU build server. Because right now here in LA it's around midnight. The date function, it will take a timestamp or date time and only return the date part. It will drop any time related values. So you pass in arguments to this function. So if we applied it to the now function, we won't see the time here. function. Like with other MySQL functions, you can chain them together to get your desired result. Right? And I just realized the camera is on, so now you know that I've shaved but um, have not had a haircut, and I don't know when I'll get my next haircut. To see the date function in action, instead of it being applied to a built-in MySQL function, we'll be retrieving just the date portion of the rental date format. I'm sorry, of the rental date column, which is a date time column type. And we'll do that for a random sample of 10 rentals. We could do that by randomly sorting the table with an order by rand. So here is the syntax. It's select date and whatever column or expression that you want to extract the date from. So go ahead and try that out, selecting just the date portion of the rental date for a random sample of 10 rentals. Okay, copy and paste the task description. Right, so I'm going to do select date, rental date, and I'll also select rental date in its untouched format. So this is selecting all the rentals, but when it returns the result, we're going to randomly sort it. Then limit the final result set to 10 rows. All right, so you can see it extracted only the date portion of the rental date, which is a date time format. Next, we're going to use the date again, but using the date so that we can group on that result. Okay. So we're going to return the number of rentals for each day in August 2005. We know the rental date is in a date time format, but we want the final result set to only show the date. So we'll use the date function for that. So select date, rental date, and now alias this expression as date, rental date. This is an aggregate query. I'm going to do a count for the number of rentals. No joins here, we're only selecting from the rental table, but limiting it to rentals in August 2005. To add the time, grouping by date, rental date. We can use the alias here for the group by. So this gives us the number of rentals per day, because if we had not used the date function, it will show the time, and it's highly unlikely that there were multiple rentals on the exact same time for the hour, minute, and second. Sometimes we may need to format a date because of the way a report needs to be generated, or because of cultural standards in different countries. So we can use the date format function for that. The first argument is passing in some sort of date, whether it's a column or an expression. And then the second argument is how you want to format that date. We're going to run the same query, find the number of rentals for each day in August 2005, but instead of using the regular MySQL format of year, month, day, we're going to switch it up to do month, day, year. So how do we get that? There are different formatting options. You can go to this W3 Schools link to give you how you can format a date. These format placeholders are what you would want to use depending on your need. So if you wanted to show the abbreviated weekday, you have to include this in the format %A, or if you want to see the full name of the month, it would be %M. Okay. But we're just going to stick to the numeric values, but with a leading 0 for the month and also for the day, because that can be different. That is also an option. Copy this. Same query, but formatting the date in a different format. Date format, and we're going to apply it to the date of the rental date. And here's how we specify the format we need. So we wanted to see the month in the beginning, so that's %M. So if you look at the documentation, %M is the month name as a numeric value with a leading 0. We're going to use forward slashes to separate the different date components. %D would be the day, but with a leading 0 as well. And then %Y for the 4-digit year. Okay. Still grouping by that first column, but it's just in a different format now. The difference in days between two dates, we use the date diff function. It takes two arguments. They both have to be dates or date times. You can go ahead and try out this query just to see how the results change based on the position of the dates. So if you use a date in the future or in the past, how does it return a different value? Let's copy and paste this. Because March is before April, it shows a negative value. So it's the difference if between a past date and a future date. This does return its values only in number of days. So only the date portion of a date time or timestamp is used. Even though that there's two different dates, and let's say the date isn't over yet, the day is not over yet, and really the difference is only 1.5 days, it's still going to calculate it based on 2 days because it's only looking at the date. All right, so go ahead and try to find the difference in days between the return date and the rental date for all August 2005 rentals. Try that out on your own. To help us validate the results, I'm going to select the return date and the rental date before doing the date div. You can copy and paste the where condition from a previous query. Okay. We can spot check the results. 2005, August 4, subtracted by 2005, August 1st. There are only 3 days difference there. If you wanted to add a specific time or date interval value, we can use the date add function. This is helpful if you're trying to calculate when to charge a particular user if they're on a monthly subscription payment plan, or when a bill is due, you can use the date add function. It takes its first argument as the date column or expression, then use the interval reserve keyword, then expression, meaning how many units you want to add to that date. So it could be 1, 3, 4, and then the unit could be days, months, years, or quarter. Here are the different unit options you can use. So you could use microseconds, seconds, year, day, hour. To see it in action, you can go ahead and copy and paste the sample select statement. It's taking the current date, so today's date, and then adding a certain interval. So 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, or 1 year. You can spot check it. So today is March 26th. Add 1 day, that will be the 27th. A week from now would be March 2nd. 1 month, and then 1 year later. So again, this is helpful if there is some sort of recurring billing cycle or some sort of schedule you need to follow and you want to know what that date is. To use the date add function on real data, we're going to look at the scenario where if a DVD is not returned after 30 days, that customer is going to be charged for the cost of that DVD. So they'll own the DVD and not have to return it because they've exceeded this 30-day limit. So calculate what is the date 30 days after the rental date for all August 2005 rentals. For simplicity reasons, we're not going to figure out who the customer is and what film they rented. We could do all that with joins. But for this example, we'll just select what is the rental ID, rental date, and adding 30 days to that rental date. date add, rental date, interval, which is a reserved keyword, and we want to say 30 days, so 30, then day. I'm going to alias this as 30 days after rental for August 2005 rentals. Oops. We'll look at the first row here. 30 days after August 1st is August 31st. Let's look at another date. 30 days after August 19 is September 18. Most of our examples we're dealing with dates, but you can also subtract or add time-based intervals. So try to subtract 2 hours from the current date time. If you recall, the function for the current date time is now. Try on your own subtracting 2 hours from the current time. We're using date sub to subtract an interval from the current time and 2 hour. This unit is always a singular. According to the LMU build MySQL server time, 2 hours from the current time is 6:35 a.m. Let's just confirm what the current date time is. Okay, so it's saying it's 8:30 a.m. We may want to figure out what is the name for a particular part of a date, or what is a description of a date. This is especially handy for reports. Instead of having somebody to work in their mind, okay, 08 is August, you can simply spell out August. Here are some examples if you want to figure out what is the day of a particular date. Like if you just wanted to get the 23, we'll use day. Or if you want to figure out what is the name of the day for a particular date, you could do that with the day name. Go ahead and copy and paste this query. And you could use this based on a certain column. Here we're passing in a literal date string, but you can use that, let's say, towards the rental date column. Add my description of the task. 2016, August 23rd, which is actually my daughter's birthday. If we look at the quarter function, it's the third quarter of the year. She was born on a Tuesday. And we can look at what week of the year, it's the 34th week, or what day of the week, what's the index. So it's the third day of the week. We can use these functions in the same way how we use the date function to group by the number of rentals per day. So we did the date on the rental date to group it based on the day of the month for, I think it was August 2005. But in this request, I'm going to figure out how many rentals per quarter in 2005. The function you want to use is the quarter, and we're going to group on that. Okay. So just select just from the rental table, and figure out how many rentals were made per quarter in 2005. Go ahead and pause and try that out on your own. I'm going to use a quarter function on the rental date column. I'm going to alias it so we can reference the alias name in the group by. Use the count to keep track of the number of rentals. This is for all of 2005. Group by rental date quarter. This is an incomplete data set, but for the data that is there, there are 3,400 rentals in the second quarter and over 12,000 rentals for the third quarter. If we wanted to figure out how many rentals were made on a certain day of the week, we could do that too. So we could use day of week, or if we want to use the name of the day, we could use that instead of quarter. That was our last example for dates. Be sure to save the file and submit it on Brightspace. Again, please send your feedback, and I'm particularly interested in feedback on how I can improve. We're most likely going to start mixing up the lectures, so some will be asynchronous, some will be recorded, and then other will be synchronous, especially on the more trickier topics. But let me know what your preference is, especially as you head towards the end of your first week of online instruction. Think about your experiences in other classes, think about what's working there and what's not, and if you could please share your feedback, that'd be helpful. All right. So you have a few more days to work on the lecture exercises because there are a few more examples to go through, and that will be due next week, and you can submit them on Brightspace. All right, thank you. Have a good weekend, and stay inside.